They sang hymns with voices that barely understood the words, and by nightfall, they were gone. That line was never meant to be heard outside Cedar Creek. It was whispered by an old undertaker in 1903, scrawled in the margins of a ledger never submitted to the county. 40 children, vanished from the church that claimed to protect their souls. No bodies, no inquiries, just names scratched from attendance records, and a silence so heavy it cracked families in half. But silence is a language. And in places like Cedar Creek, Indiana, it speaks with the voice of obedience, fear, and the sacred rot that festers under holy marble. The winter of 1878 didn't begin with screams. It began with snow. Thick, beautiful snow blanketing the town like grace itself. Church bells rang. Families sang. The First Methodist Church stood tall, its twin bell towers kissing the sky like fingers in prayer. On the outside, it was perfect. A place built to honor God. But underneath, beneath the limestone floors and stained glass windows, behind the wooden crosses and embroidered vestments, something else was happening. Something ancient. Something calculated. You were never meant to know this. This story has been buried, not in the way most crimes are, but in the way that institutions bury truth when they are part of it, when they feed on it, when they call it righteous. You see, this wasn't just one bad person doing something awful. This was systemic, crafted, the work of leaders who wore robes, built schools, and spoke with the authority of heaven. Men who knew how to use guilt as a weapon. Women who smiled while they studied your children. Elders who asked you to trust them with your future and sold it behind closed doors. We begin tonight with Margaret Wilson, the perfect teacher in the perfect town. But this isn't her story. This is a reckoning. Because the moment you hear what really happened beneath that church, you'll never trust a sanctuary again. This is not just a crime. It is the most evil betrayal in religious history. And what was found beneath that floorboard, God help us, was never meant to be unearthed. Not by a substitute teacher. Not by you. And yet here you are, ready to know what they buried. Keep watching, because once we begin, there is no way back. The first sign was so subtle, so ordinary, that no one noticed. A single ledger entry, slightly out of order. One name listed twice, then crossed out. In any other school, in any other town, it would have been dismissed as clerical error. But Ellen Hartwell wasn't just any substitute teacher. She was precise, trained to notice anomalies. And that crossed-out name? It didn't match the church's memory. There was no Timothy Morrison in the congregation, no boy by that name in town records, no family by that surname anywhere in the Cedar Creek census. But the name appeared, again, in an older ledger, then another, always enrolled, always marked as present. It was like tracking a ghost through ink. Ellen had arrived just weeks before, stepping into the cold stone halls of First Methodist with nothing more than credentials and conviction. A devout woman, a disciplined mind. She didn't come looking for darkness, but darkness noticed her. And when she asked too many questions, the silence around her changed shape. People stopped making eye contact. The pastor began cutting meetings short, and Margaret Wilson, that saint of Cedar Creek, grew distant, protective, as if guarding something sacred or dangerous. Ellen's suspicions grew when she found the trapdoor. It wasn't on any of the church's architectural plans. It sat beneath the Sunday school dais, hidden under a heavy rug and bolted shut. The wood around it had been scorched years ago, as if fire had tried to erase whatever was below. She opened it. The air that poured out was cold and foul, like old metal and something long dead. She descended the stone steps with a lantern, not knowing that every step was peeling back a layer of illusion the town had spent decades building. What she found wasn't just storage. It was a system. Shelves lined with personal items, children's shoes, toys, old school books, everything, labeled by name. Names that didn't exist anymore. But it was the smell that broke her. That unmistakable smell of rot, sealed into earth. There were shallow depressions in the floor, dozens of them, lined with scraps of fabric and small bones, tiny vertebrae, finger joints, teeth. She vomited. Then she fled. She didn't sleep that night, not because of what she saw, but because of what she finally understood. The children were never meant to return. They were selected, prepared, and erased. When Ellen Hartwell returned to the church basement the next morning, she wasn't alone. 2 men from the church board were already there, sleeves rolled up, breathing heavily as they hoisted crates into a horse-drawn wagon parked behind the building. The rug had been replaced, the trap door bolted. The smell scrubbed away with lye. They didn't speak to her. They didn't have to. One of them, Thomas Greeley, the church treasurer, just stared. Not with guilt, not even fear. It was something colder. Warning. Ellen didn't confront them. She simply walked past, climbed the pulpit stairs, and began teaching Sunday school as if nothing had happened. But something had snapped inside her. A thread pulled too tight. And the more she looked at those children, their innocent faces, their small hands clinging to hymnals, the more she saw them as prey. The smiles of the congregation had become masks, the hymnals, distractions, and every adult eye that watched her seemed to carry a silent question. Will she stay quiet? That afternoon, she visited the town registrar. She began requesting birth records, baptism certificates, school enrollments. What she found was more damning than any bones in the floor. Between 1876 and 1878, exactly 40 children had been enrolled in Cedar Creek's Sunday school program, whose birth records were missing or incomplete. All had supposedly joined the educational excursions under Margaret Wilson's supervision. None had returned. None were registered in any other towns. No forwarding addresses, no family letters, no sightings, just vanished like vapor into the church's archive of silence. And when Ellen approached Sheriff Rollins, a man she'd known since her arrival, he listened quietly, nodded, took notes. Then he told her to leave it alone. For the sake of the town, he said, and your reputation. But it wasn't her reputation he was protecting. It was something older, heavier, something that smelled like coal dust and communion wine, the kind of protection that comes when powerful men feel the ground shifting under sacred lies. Ellen was warned, first gently, then with force. Her boarding house room was ransacked, her teaching schedule reduced, her letters to state authorities intercepted. But the truth has gravity. And once you've seen the bones, once you've looked into that hidden ledger and found the names they tried to erase, you can't unsee it. Cedar Creek had built its church on limestone, but its sanctuary was a tomb, and the gospel they preached was paid for in children's blood. It took Ellen 3 days to decide what to do next. She didn't go to the newspapers. Not yet. The local press was owned by Robert Hayes, a man whose influence ran so deep that ink itself bent to his will. No, Ellen needed someone outside, someone untouched by Cedar Creek's rot. She turned to the Indiana Bureau of Education. Under the pretense of submitting an academic report, she mailed them a dossier: missing children, falsified records, and one hand-drawn map of the church basement, with a red X marking the bones. But weeks passed. No reply. Then came the letter. Handwritten, no return address, just 4 words: they know you spoke. That night, the church caught fire. Only part of it burned, the Sunday school wing, convenient, precise, surgical. Fire crews arrived in record time. The flames were extinguished before they reached the sanctuary. But when Ellen returned to the site, her classroom was ash. The records gone. The trapdoor sealed beneath charred flooring and official explanations. An accident, they said. Faulty oil lamp. Even as black smoke still drifted from the eaves, Pastor Elijah Warren took the pulpit. He preached resilience. He called for faith. He called the fire a test from God. And the congregation wept on cue. But Ellen knew the truth. This was no divine trial. This was an execution of evidence. It was then she realized something sickening. The congregation wasn't in the dark. They were complicit. Not in every detail, not in every crime, but in something worse. The willful ignorance that sanctifies horror when it wears the robes of righteousness. They had noticed the silence. They had wondered about the missing letters. They had seen the same families smile a little too tightly when asked about their children's missionary training, and they had chosen to believe the lie, because it was easier, because questioning it meant unraveling everything, their church, their faith, their community standing, because if they looked too closely, they might see their own reflection in the machinery of evil. So they looked away, and Cedar Creek continued to sing hymns over unmarked graves, but Ellen didn't look away. She began making copies of what little she had left. Journals, names, recollections, whispered stories from women who had lost children but dared not speak. She wasn't just chasing justice anymore. She was building a record for the day the world was ready to remember what Cedar Creek chose to forget. And that day would come. The town of Cedar Creek had a way of swallowing memories. Ellen Hartwell began to see it not as a place, but as a machine. Self-sustaining, self-defending, powered by belief and denial in equal measure. It didn't kill you with violence. It smothered you in politeness, drowned you in gospel, and buried you beneath layers of community tradition that no one dared peel back. But not everyone in town was silent. Late one evening, a knock came at Ellen's boarding room. A figure stood in the hallway. A frail woman, shivering in a threadbare shawl, her face hollow from years of silence. Her name was Rebecca Miller. Her son Samuel had vanished in 1877. He had been 11. He was bright, she whispered. Too bright. Rebecca